Brothers and sisters of Tanzania, sons and daughters of the great land of Africa, I speak to you not as a president, not as a man above any other, but as a fellow African.
The dawn after the gathering in Arusha was unlike any other. The air itself seemed different, charged with a quiet sense of possibility. Word of the meeting spread like wildfire across the land. No official news outlet covered it, yet everyone somehow knew. From the fishermen of Mwanza to the students of Dodoma, whispers traveled faster than the wind. Traoré has spoken, and Tanzania has listened. He remained in the country longer than planned, choosing to walk among the people instead of staying in diplomatic halls. Cameras followed him, but his gestures were simple, shaking hands with market women, speaking with farmers, embracing children with the tenderness of a father. There was no script, no spectacle. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there to understand. At a rural school near Moshi, he met a young girl named Asha. Her eyes carried both intelligence and exhaustion. When he asked her what she wanted to become, she hesitated. "A teacher," she said softly. "But my father says there's no money for school next term." Traoré knelt beside her. "You must keep learning, Asha," he told her. "Books are weapons too. The kind that build, not destroy." That night, he wrote her name in his notebook, a habit he had formed since the early days of his revolution in Burkina Faso. Every name he wrote belonged to someone whose story had touched him deeply. Asha's name joined that growing list of souls that fueled his fight. Back in the capital, Dar es Salaam was restless. The government grew uneasy with his influence. Ministers whispered in corridors, worried that Traoré's message had become a movement. Some accused him of interfering in internal affairs. Others wanted to meet him privately, hoping to capture some of his newfound popularity. But Traoré refused private deals. "I did not come to be praised," he said simply. "I came to speak truth. If truth threatens you, then you must question not the truth, but yourself." Despite the tension, something miraculous began to unfold. Across the country, Tanzanians began organizing community dialogues called Circles of Unity. They met under trees, in classrooms, at markets. Ordinary people discussing extraordinary ideas. Dignity, independence, solidarity. No one ordered them to do it. They just did. It was as though a sleeping giant had finally opened its eyes. Rahima, the journalist whose letter had gone viral, found herself at the center of this awakening. She began recording interviews with villagers and youth leaders, documenting the new wave of consciousness that Traoré's visit had inspired. Her documentaries reached millions online, painting a portrait of a people rediscovering their voice. One evening, she was granted a short meeting with Traoré himself. When she entered the small guest house where he was staying, she was struck by the simplicity of his surroundings. No luxury, no entourage, just a desk, a Bible, and a Burkina flag neatly folded beside it. "You have become the bridge," he told her after she introduced herself. "The bridge?" she asked, puzzled. "Yes, between words and action, between silence and truth. Every generation needs its bridge. Do not let fear break it." His words stayed with her long after he left Tanzania. But not everyone saw hope. Some saw danger. Powerful individuals, foreign investors, local elites, and even some leaders within the region grew uneasy. They saw his influence spreading across borders, his name being chanted at rallies, his speeches translated into Swahili, Zulu, Amharic, Yoruba. They whispered that he was trying to create a new movement, one that didn't rely on them. And to the old order, that was unacceptable. One night, as rain lashed against the windows of his guest house, Traoré sat with his closest advisor, Issouf, the same man who had stood by him in Ouagadougou months earlier. "They will not stop," Issouf warned. "Your message threatens their comfort." Traoré smiled faintly. "Then let them be uncomfortable. The truth is not meant to make tyrants sleep peacefully." He stood and looked out at the storm. "Issouf, do you know what they fear most? The people?" "No," Traoré said quietly. "They fear when the people begin to think. That is when empires fall." The next morning, he decided to address the continent once more, this time from Tanzanian soil. He requested a local community station instead of a national one. The crew was shocked. No African leader had ever made such a humble broadcast. But he wanted the message to feel real, not polished. When the camera light blinked red, he began without notes, his voice steady but filled with passion. "My African family," he said, "from the Sahel to the Swahili coast, from the desert to the ocean, I speak to you not as a leader, but as a witness. I have seen how hunger has stolen our laughter, how greed has stolen our dreams. Yet I have also seen our power, the kind that grows in silence, the kind that rises when we remember who we are." He paused. "They tell us to wait for change. But change is not a guest. It is a storm. And we are that storm." Across the continent, millions watched. Some cried. Some felt goosebumps. Others whispered prayers. The message crossed languages, borders, and generations. The next morning, Tanzanian newspapers called it the Arusha Declaration of a New Dawn. Even outside Africa, commentators noticed. In Europe, analysts debated his rising influence. In America, journalists called him the voice of the African Renaissance. But to the people, he was simply Ibrahim, the man who reminded them that dignity was not a gift from rulers. It was a birthright. Weeks later, he returned to Burkina Faso, but the echoes of Tanzania followed him. In villages, people painted murals of the Tanzanian mountains with his quotes below. In schools, teachers used his speeches to inspire lessons about self-reliance. Across Africa, something irreversible had begun, but his journey was not without pain. Soon after his return, anonymous threats began arriving. Political alliances shifted. Offers of money and influence tried to sway him, but he refused them all. "You cannot buy conviction," he told Issouf one night. "It is carved into soul." Rahima, from her newsroom in Dar es Salaam, kept covering his influence. When a government official warned her to stop, she responded boldly. If truth becomes illegal, then silence becomes a crime. Her defiance made her a target too, but it also made her a symbol of courage. Months passed, and Africa entered a new season. Youth movements across the continent adopted his message. You cannot imprison an idea whose time has come. Rallies in Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and Uganda echoed the same chant. The air of awakening spread, and no force could contain it. One night, Traoré received a letter from Asha, the little girl from Moshi. It read, "Dear Uncle Ibrahim, I am back in school. I am studying hard because you told me books are weapons that build. When I grow up, I will teach others to fight ignorance with knowledge. Thank you for believing in us." He read the letter in silence, tears glimmering in his eyes. "This," he said softly, "is victory." In Tanzania, the spirit of his visit continued to grow. Communities built small libraries named after him. Artists wrote songs blending traditional drums with modern beats, singing of unity and strength. The phrase, "a message from Burkina," became a symbol of hope, printed on shirts and posters. The sun hung low over Ouagadougou, painting the horizon in deep streaks of amber and gold. Inside the presidential office, Ibrahim Traoré stood by the wide window, silent, his gaze fixed far beyond the horizon, as if he could see across the borders of Burkina Faso, beyond the plains and rivers, all the way to the heart of Tanzania. There was something in his eyes that night, an intensity that spoke louder than words, the fire of a man who carried burdens larger than himself, yet refused to bow before them. He turned to his aide, a quiet man named Issouf, who stood patiently near the door. "Prepare the message," Traoré said, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "This one will not be like the others. It must reach every heart in Tanzania." Issouf hesitated. "Do you wish to send it through the council, sir, or—" Traoré raised a hand. "No, this one must be spoken. It must be felt." He walked toward his desk where an old map of Africa lay stretched open. It was faded, the kind drawn long before independence, when colonial borders sliced through ethnic lines like careless wounds. Traoré stared at the map for a long moment, his fingers tracing the invisible routes of pain and resilience that connected nations like veins. His voice softened, barely a whisper. "They think we are divided, Issouf, but the spirit of Africa cannot be broken by lines on paper." News had reached him of a crisis brewing in Tanzania. Farmers displaced, workers protesting, the young restless and searching for meaning amid the noise of promises. Yet the world remained silent. International observers turned their faces away. Traoré, however, had seen enough silence to know it was a weapon of its own. That night, he wrote by hand, candlelight flickering across the pages. His message was not political. It was not about power. It was about awakening. He wrote of unity, of courage, of remembering who they were before the world told them what to be. Every word was carved from conviction, every sentence heavy with the weight of his heart. By dawn, the speech was finished. He called for his media team. "We will broadcast at sunset," he said. "No editing, no rehearsing. The people must see me as I am." When the moment came, the cameras rolled in a small hall inside the presidential palace. There were no teleprompters, no podiums, no flags, just a wooden table, a worn chair, and the face of a man whose soul burned with truth. He began slowly, his words rising like the morning wind. "My brothers and sisters of Tanzania, I speak to you not as a president, but as your brother in struggle. Our lands may be separated by borders, but our pain is one. Our hope is one. Our future is bound by the same rhythm of the African drum that beats inside every one of us." The tone shifted, gentle but firm, prophetic yet intimate. There are forces that wish to keep us asleep. They whisper that we are weak, that we are dependent, that we cannot rise without their permission. But I tell you, Africa was never born to kneel. We were born to rise. The broadcast spread faster than anyone expected. Within hours, clips flooded Tanzanian social media. Students shared it in WhatsApp groups. Elders played it on old radios in village squares. Young people gathered around phones in dusty streets, listening to the message like it was a long-lost prophecy finding its way home. In Dar es Salaam, a young journalist named Rahima watched the speech from her small apartment. She had been losing faith, tired of writing about corruption, tired of broken promises, tired of hope itself. But when Traoré spoke, she felt something shift inside her. His words didn't sound like politics. They sounded like truth. That night, she wrote an open letter titled, "The Flame from Burkina Faso." In it, she said, "Ibrahim Traoré reminds us that leadership is not about titles. It is about courage. It is about standing up when silence is easier. He speaks the language of the heart, a language Tanzania must remember." The letter went viral. By morning, Tanzanians from Mwanza to Zanzibar were talking about it. Some called him the new voice of Africa. Others called him dangerous. But everyone listened. Even the government took notice. Meanwhile, Traoré's team was flooded with responses, letters, videos, messages of solidarity. Some Tanzanian youth groups even asked to visit Burkina Faso. But Traoré was calm. "Do not rush," he told his aides. "Let them feel it first. The seed must grow before we water it." Weeks passed, and Tanzania began to stir in new ways. Communities gathered to discuss unity, corruption, and self-reliance. Students quoted Traoré's lines during debates. Farmers began to speak openly about dignity and fair trade. A quiet revolution of the mind was forming, and it frightened those in power. One evening, Rahima was called by an anonymous source, a government insider, who whispered, "They are planning to censor his message. They fear what it's doing to the people." She knew what that meant. The truth was shaking foundations. She reached out to Traoré's communication team and warned them. The next morning, a live broadcast appeared from Ouagadougou again, this time unannounced. Traoré, sitting in the same simple room, looked directly into the camera. "They will try to silence our message," he said. "But no one can silence the spirit of truth. Tanzania, you are not alone. You are the heartbeat of a rising continent. The young, the poor, the forgotten. You are the light of Africa. Do not fear the darkness. You are the fire that makes it flee." He paused, eyes fierce, then spoke slowly. "You cannot imprison an idea whose time has come." That phrase became a rallying cry. Artists painted murals of him across Tanzanian streets. Musicians sampled his speech into songs that played in buses and bars. The youth, once divided by politics, began to find common ground in a single belief that Africa's destiny could not be dictated by outsiders. But Traoré knew the cost of truth. He remembered how his own rise had come through storms of betrayal and resistance. He knew what power did when felt threatened. Still, he refused to retreat. Late one night, He sat alone on the palace balcony. The moonlight bathed the courtyard below, where guards stood silently. He thought of Julius Nyerere, the father of Tanzanian independence, and whispered to the night, "Brother, the fire you lit still burns." It only needed air to rise again. Far away, in a remote village near Lake Victoria, an old man named Mzee Kelna sat by a fire surrounded by children. He listened to the wind carrying faint echoes from a radio. Traoré's speech replayed by a local station. When it ended, he smiled. "You see," he said to the children, "this is how Africa speaks when it remembers itself." The children listened quietly, eyes reflecting the flames. In that moment, the message traveled farther than any border could stop. It lived in the hearts of those who had almost forgotten their worth. Days later, Traoré received an unexpected message from Tanzania itself. Not from the government, but from a group of elders and youth leaders who wanted to meet him in person. They called themselves the Circle of Unity. They said his words had awoken something ancient, something that no authority could contain. He agreed to meet them, not in a palace, but in the open plains of Arusha, where the mountains kiss the clouds and the earth feels sacred beneath the feet. The preparations began quietly. The world didn't know it yet, but history was about to witness a conversation that would echo for generations.